This week on the Tech on Tap podcast, we talk about the new early access program functionality with Lab on Demand.
Welcome to the Tech on Tap podcast with Justin Parisi.
I love NetApp.
Oh, yeah.
NetApp. I love this company. Support.
I love NetApp because it's so fun.
Hello and welcome to the Tech on Tap podcast. My name is Justin Parisi. I'm here in the basement of my house, and with me today I have Brian De Laredo. So Brian, what do you do here at NetApp, and how do we reach you?
Hey, Justin. So I work in a team called Lab on Demand. I'm actually part of a team of solutions architects that build content for ready-to-use labs that show off NetApp products and NetApp solutions.
All right, excellent. So Brian, if I wanted to reach you, how do I do that?
So all our services have online portals for NetApp internal employees who want to check out our service. It's labondemand.netapp.com, and for our reselling partners as well. For customers, it's really easy, handsonlabs.netapp.com. That's how you reach the customer-facing portal.
All right, cool. So, we've mentioned Labs on Demand, and if people aren't familiar with what that is, I mean, it's kind of straightforward from what it's called, but could you kind of give us an overview of what Lab on Demand is with NetApp's perspective?
Absolutely. So for a little over a decade, Lab on Demand has been this growing and expanding service offer inside of NetApp, and traditionally we've been for internal NetApp users and reselling partners to have ready-to-use demo-ready labs that have products already installed. We've also provided Insight hands-on labs directly to customers, and we also have a service called Bootcamp service. And so those environments are an opportunity for the Lab on Demand team and NetApp sales teams to host customer-facing events where they can give folks and users a hands-on lab experience where they can try out these products.
All right, cool. So with Lab on Demand, I mean, it's pretty much you sign up for an account if you're a customer or a field person, and then you can go in and choose from a variety of different labs that have been created by TMEs or the field for different use cases. Correct?
Yes. So a little over 2 years ago, we decided we were already delivering these digital labs, all virtual environments to events, and we decided why not make this available to customers using their support logins. So that's how Hands-On Lab was created out of Lab on Demand, and those labs are a full catalog that we work with subject matter experts and product experts inside the company, and we write storyboards on what problem we're trying to solve for the customer, and then we build a lab guide around it, and those lab guides walk everybody through exactly how to use the lab and where to click and what to do.
Yeah, and ultimately the goal is to have an easy and free access to an environment that isn't your production environment, so you can go test things out and see how it works, see how you want to implement things, and get a better idea of how everything fits in with the ONTAP systems.
Exactly. So yeah, free is a big deal. So this is no cost to a customer. If they already have a support agreement, they just log into the site and take a lab. In fact, this morning I just timed myself within a few clicks from looking at the lab overview page to getting in and logging into System Manager. It took me under 40 seconds. So this is free to use, and a lot of customers have gotten back to us and been really excited about having this opportunity because they can actually fire something up, try a command that they're not sure of before trying it on a production environment. And not all customers have test gear where they can run some commands and try things out.
That's right. And, it covers a variety of things, whether it's NAS or System Manager. I would imagine you even have stand labs.
Yeah, so we do run all our Lab on Demand labs on virtual machines. So we don't have today the ability to do stuff like Fiber Channel, but many of the things you need to do on the SAN side can be done with iSCSI. So we can do whatever we can from an all virtual perspective. We try to mimic as much as we can the hardware. Some of our labs can even do stuff like HA failover and Metro cluster even.
So, this is all a virtual environment, so it spins up pretty quickly. How long do these labs generally last? Like, if let's say I spin something up one day, does it last for a few days? Does it last for a few hours? Do I have to spin it back up again?
Sure. So we wouldn't be on demand if it wasn't accessible right away. So what we do is we provision and start up the labs before a user asks for it. That way, as soon as you ask for it, you get it right away. And for now, Lab on Demand users have been familiar with getting up to 5 labs for up to 7 days. With the hands-on lab service, our infrastructure is a little bit smaller because we're reaching a wider audience with all our customers that have support agreements. So those labs are available 1 lab per user, but you can take the same lab over and over. We've seen in our usage logs, users request the same lab over and over. So there's no limit as to how many times you can take a lab.
So, we kind of have covered how the customers can use it, that they use it for basically a proving ground, more or less. What about the field? Like, how does the field leverage it, and how do you leverage it if you're trying to attract new customers?
Yeah, so we have a lot of usage from the field. Many times they're trying to prepare for a customer demo, and they need an environment where we like to call it the cooking show. So they want to show what something looks like before it's configured and then what it looks like after. So they may book 2 labs and do one or the other, and then be able to switch between the two. Sometimes when they're preparing for talking to the customers about requirements, they may not know all the things that might come up in the discussion. So they may have a couple labs running with different products and be able to switch between those. It's not quite a POC like you might do with CPOC group with customer POCs, but it's ready to use demo environment. So you can actually see the products in action and talk through how that might work for the customer, and just kind of enable more discussion back and forth. For customers in the hands-on lab environment, they're going to use the labs kind of in that environment where they're going to try things out and do self-exploration. But we have even another customer-facing portal called Test Drive. So Test Drive is available off of the netapp.com site. And in there, we have a smaller subset of labs. These labs are, again, free to use. They're targeted toward prospects. So these are folks that have never used NetApp and maybe have heard about it, but they're not currently a NetApp customer. So in exchange for some simple contact information, they get access within a couple minutes to an email that'll give them access to a lab. And that lab will allow them to do many of the same things that are in hands-on labs. And then, somebody may follow up with them from NetApp. On the hands-on lab side, that catalog is much larger than Test Drive. So we try to keep a little bit more in-depth storyboards in there so customers can gain more knowledge and confidence as they go through the solutions.
Cool. So if I'm a new customer and I've have interest in kind of poking around and I don't have a customer account, I can certainly use this Test Drive functionality so I can get access to these things.
Yep. So Test Drive is a great place to start. And once you become a customer and you have a support login, our support site is fantastic. There's so many things you can get into. You can use those same exact credentials to get into hands-on labs.
Excellent. So, we've covered what Lab on Demand is and, how you can leverage it. I understand there's some new functionality coming, and that's centered around the early access program. But before we get into that, let's talk about the early access program. Can you tell me what that is and, why people would be interested in using that?
Sure. So the product teams and the general lifecycle management process for delivering new releases of ONTAP has a program called Early Access. And the Early Access program takes customers who are willing to participate and have gear. Traditionally, they sign up to get versions of ONTAP code that are pre-release, and they have gear that they can run it on and test and provide feedback directly back to the product team under NDA. What we've done is we've kind of worked with the product teams and figured out if we could develop an all virtual version of a lab, we could potentially get more people to participate, customers in particular. So we're starting to reach out into the community site that manages the EAP program and the direct feedback to the product team. And we're now offering an EAP lab for ONTAP. So you can get a pre-release look under NDA, of course, to check out ONTAP System Manager and some of the new features that are coming. And then more importantly, be able to take a look at some confidence in what the new changes are, what the new UI features might include, and then be able to provide some feedback directly to the customer, directly to the product team. So not all the feedback may make it in that release, but it'll definitely make it back to the people who are listening.
So as far as the early access program goes, how would somebody get a hold of that sort of thing? Like, is it for existing customers, and if they, or is it for the field to start initiating that? Like, how do we get those people started on that?
So Lab on Demand users will just go to the catalog they're familiar with and labondemand.netapp.com. It'll be listed right at the top, and that the lab is out there today, so they can walk through, book a copy of the lab, and sign up to join the community site group. For existing customers, they need to use their user login that they would use on the support site and get into handsonlabs.netapp.com. From there, we have a page that talks about how to sign up for a communities account if they've never done it before. And once they're on the community site, they're able to request access to the communities group that the product team monitors for feedback. And while that's being processed, they can also book a copy of the lab after they accept the NDA terms and jump right in and start exploring.
Cool. So I would imagine that you already have something like 9.10.1 out there ready to go and for people to poke around with.
We do. And so what we've tried to do to make sure that the experience is focused and nobody's wasting their time, there are some features that get posted on the community site that have very specific test plans that require hardware. So we take those test plans and our team kind of looks through them, tries to find out which can be accomplished through using the virtual machine version of ONTAP. And we include those in a lab notes doc. And so that way you're able to go through the test plan without weeding through which test plans work on hardware, which ones don't work on virtual machines. So they just try the lab notes doc, run through what's in the lab. They'll be able to see what's out there. We also hope to, again, this is not feature complete. So there's some features that aren't ready yet, and they're still making it into the pre-release builds. So we're hoping to update it a few times as new features become available. We'll include some notes in the documentation and update the lab so that the newer version of ONTAP is in there.
So this is live already. What kind of uptick have you seen with people using it? Are there a lot of people already in the EAP labs? Are they already poking around, or is it something that hasn't really taken off yet?
Yeah, we're getting some word out there. In the first week, we already had 2 customers that traditionally did hardware. They wanted to try it out on the all virtual version and get started sooner. So they were able to take advantage of it right away. And we're seeing a little bit of interest and some signups on the community site as a result of finding our lab. But hopefully this podcast and other communications will let people know about Hands-On Labs, and they'll find it that way as well.
So as far as this goes, I mean, I know there's some feature functionality in 9.10.1 that's kind of performance based. In a lab on demand setting, you wouldn't necessarily be looking at a performance benchmark use case, right? It'd be more about functionality and how it works.
Yeah, we generally try to stay away from the performance speed type tests where we're going to demonstrate functionality. Sometimes it works if we can kind of at a smaller scale demonstrate a concept. We'll try that. But usually we try to remind folks that this is an all virtual version. So you're really testing System Manager and the UI and trying to understand how features may be configured, but you're not going to get the same level of performance that you might get from real hardware. So if that's the test plan you're trying to follow, or that's the experience you're trying to get, it's probably better to save that for hardware.
What I'm specifically thinking of is the NVMe over TCP that's being released, right? So that's something that it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do an EAP on a lab on demand environment, because what you're looking for is the performance boost versus something like iSCSI.
We can try it, and we're hoping to explore it when the feature becomes ready for us to try. But there's some client level configuration that needs to be done, so that's an extra component for my team to look at. But we're going to work with hopefully closely with the subject matter experts inside the company to see what we can do. But it definitely won't be the same as hardware.
Now, I know that when something gets released, it isn't necessarily the fully fledged version that it was going to be. So with EAP and Lab on Demand, is there anything that you're targeting for future support that might be interesting to note here?
Yeah, so we're looking at trying to make it more seamless. This is our first attempt at it, so there's probably some areas for improvement. But we already have interest, and we're working with other product teams, not just the ONTAP system manager side of the house. We've got AIQ so Unified Manager. That team's provided us with some early build code and some test plans. So we're hoping to get on board with that. We'd like to work with the Snap Center team. Really, many of the manageability products NetApp has, if we can get started sooner, there's a lot of benefits, not just to the customers and the users of the labs, but it gives us a chance to get a sneak peek at features so that we can start writing our storyboards and our final labs can be ready.
And what about other products in the NetApp portfolio? And we're very ONTAP centric here, and we talked about Active IQ and the manageability stuff. But what about things like E-Series or Storage Grid?
So E-Series and Storage Grid are a little trickier because we're limited in what we can do virtually. So on the E-Series simulator, it is more of an emulator, and that makes it a little more difficult to try new features. But we're constantly talking to different product teams and trying to embed ourselves earlier in the product release so we can figure those things out. Storage Grid is also a little bit different because of the way it deploys, but we certainly could do something with that product team in the future as well.
And that's strictly speaking about EAP, but I guess you already have labs on demand for those particular products. Yes. Right there, right?
Yes, we do. We have full-fledged, fully configured environments that you can log into and start exploring the solution. What we want to make sure we do is if we're teaching a class or doing a workshop or someone is doing a demo, we want to try to make sure the demo looks like what it might look like in production. So if there are some things on the back end that aren't exactly the same because of the way we're running it, we try to fast forward the storyboard to the point where it would be relevant to a production environment.
And what about things external to NetApp? Like if you want to leverage a hybrid cloud functionality, like you want to try to test that out, are we able to tie these labs on demand into things like ANF or CVS or CVO, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. So we have some cloud products where we've been able to build the lab environments all self-contained, and so they don't depend on any external resources. And those labs are available. Some of them are available to hands-on labs for customers today. But we also have hybrid cloud on demand labs. So they take the traditional lab on demand environment and we set up a VPN tunnel to a hyperscaler, and we end up providing user accounts for the life of the lab. And you're actually provisioning a lab with some components in the cloud and some components in your lab. And we integrate today with Azure, GCP, and AWS. And those labs are, fully functional hybrid cloud environments, and you can explore the NetApp solutions.
And again, this is all at no cost to the customer or the field person, right? This is all basically we're eating the cost here.
Right. So we manage the budget. We also control the cost containment because when we end the lab, we delete the lab and we delete everything that was done during the life of the lab. So that saves us on runtime costs. We also have little tricks we do when we provision the lab where we might power down some features until the user is ready to get started. But we provide the budget for that. With as far as access goes, Lab on Demand users can get access self-service today to hybrid cloud on demand labs. For customers, the way we've seen that play out is we've had people ask through our bootcamp service to do a workshop. And our bootcamp service is a fantastic way for someone in the field to get a group of customers and try a lab that's already in Lab on Demand, but maybe not ready for hands-on labs. And we'll provide temporary user accounts and passwords to the bootcamp or the workshop organizer, and that person will distribute them to the attendees. The events are typically a couple days long, and sometimes that's bookended with some presentations or discussions on the solution. And hybrid cloud on demand has been used several times with some really successful boot camps that were delivered to customer groups to try out some of our cloud products without having to spend any money in the cloud.
So as a lab on demand administrator and architect, I understand that you have to really keep in mind the costs associated with that cloud piece. Are you leveraging things like the NetApp Spot product to help you with that, or how are you managing those costs?
So we fall under a cloud governance model for each of our hyperscalers that's managed by the group inside of NetApp called the Cloud Eco Team. And so they manage all our costs. Again, we're just like an enterprise. We're organization underneath a larger organization. And they utilize Spot. We're talking to the Spot team on how to deliver a lab inside of Lab on Demand that'll kind of talk about the various, because Spot is not just one product. It's a handful of products that do a lot of new things to NetApp customers. So we're going to try to leverage that and experience to help educate folks on what Spot can do. But we've already seen some benefits from the IT group coming back to us and finding efficiencies that could be gained by tweaking some things. For example, our CVO instances, sometimes the lab pre-provisions with CVO running, we figured out how to shut it off right after it provisions and then allow the user through the lab guide instruction how to turn it back on, and that saves a little bit of money.
Excellent. So does Lab on Demand partner with things like the learning services where they run classes for internal and external customers, where we basically give them education and tell them how to use NetApp products? Does Lab on Demand fit into that at all, or is that something that there's a partnership, or is that something separate?
It's definitely a partnership. So NetApp Learning Services has a real curriculum-based learning management system. And so they can assign not just an instructor-led course, but they can assign videos, web-based training. And they do have many of their courses offer hands-on experience, and they have lab exercises. Those are provided by our team in the Lab on Demand group. So we provide the infrastructure. We also manage some hardware courses that they offer, where they're doing something that does require hardware and it can't be done from the virtual machine. So we offer those through the learning management system and through NetApp Learning Services as part of their course catalog.
So as far as scale goes, how large can Lab on Demand get at any given moment?
So we manage that on a pretty regular basis. So I work on the content team. There's another team we call the operations team, and they manage our workload. Luckily, because we take advantage of nearly every ONTAP storage feature, we have a tremendous amount of capacity, and we make use of our storage efficiency like crazy. So we're pretty much staying ahead of our workload and adding pods as needed. Our pods are usually a group of gear that includes our storage, our compute, and any of our front end stuff that makes it all work. And so we've run VMware currently, but there's nothing to say in the future that we couldn't switch to something else. But yeah, our operations team makes sure that we have enough capacity to handle it. But at any given moment, we're running about 2,500 labs concurrently.
All right, Brian, thanks so much for joining us and talking to us all about the new early access program functionality of the Lab on Demand. So, Brian, again, if we wanted to reach you or find out more information, how do we do that?
Thank you for having me. So if you're a prospect, you can go to netapp.com and look for test drive. If you're a current NetApp customer, you can just go to handsonlabs.netapp.com. And if you're an internal user or reseller, you can just go to labondemand.netapp.com.
All right, excellent. Thanks so much for joining us. All right, that music tells me it's time to go. If you'd like to get in touch with us, send us an email to podcast@netapp.com or send us a tweet @netapp. As always, if you'd like to subscribe, find us on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or via TechOnTapPodcast.com. If you like the show today, leave us a review. On behalf of the entire Tech on Tap podcast team, I'd like to thank Brian De Laredo for joining us today. As always, thanks for listening.
Oh, yeah. Is it just me that's getting off on this? Oh, yeah.